Hi everyone and welcome to Oracle Database at AWS Huddle channel. In this video we will show you the required step to configure DNS resolution from OCI. When the ODB network is created, two private resolver endpoints are deployed in the corresponding VCN within the OCI linked tenancy. One endpoint serves as a listening address and the other as a forwarding address. However, DNS resolution is not enabled by default. You can enable DNS resolution from AWS to OCI or from OCI to AWS. In this video, we will see how to configure DNS resolution from OCI to AWS. To resolve AWS domain names from OCI, you need to configure a Route 53 inbound endpoint and create a resolver rule to forward domain names DNS queries from OCI to AWS. Here a summary of the steps we will configure from both the AWS and OCI consoles. Starting from the AWS console, we will review the settings of the VPC that we want to associate with the Route 53 private hosted zone to be resolved from OCI. We will then create a security group from the Amazon VPC dashboard, which will be associated with a new Route 53 inbound endpoint. Next, we will switch to the OCI console and select the VCN associated with the ODB network, where our Oracle Database AWS VM clusters have been provisioned. From there, we will create a network security group and a private resolver rule to be associated with the DNS private resolver forwarder endpoint. This will enable DNS resolution of the Amazon VPC private hosted zone from the OCI VCN through the Route 53 inbound endpoint. Finally, we will validate DNS resolution from an EC2 instance running in this VPC from a virtual machine within an Oracle Database AWS Exadata VM cluster. Let's start checking the VPC configuration for which we want to resolve the private hosted zone from OCI. This is the VPC in scope, that is the same that is direct peer with the ODB network. And if I select the VPC, I need to check that the DNS resolution and the DNS hostnames are enabled. And in the DHCP option set, I can verify the default domain name that we will have to be resolved on OCI side. Now I can connect to 3 EC2 instances within this VPC and distribute it across 3 different availability zones. And as you can see, the default domain name of the EC2 instances are .ec2.internal, and from here I can connect to a VM in the Oracle Database AWS VM clusters running in the ODB network directly ODB peer with this VPC. I'm connecting from the first EC2 instance, from the second one, and as you can see from this virtual machine, I'm currently not able to resolve the EC2 instances fully qualified domain name. So let's move ahead to set up the DNS resolution from OCI. The first thing to do is to create a dedicated security group that will be attached to the Route 53 inbound endpoint. I have already a security group configured for outbound endpoint. Now I do the same for the inbound endpoint. I specify a name, a short description, the VPC that I want to associate to this security group, that is the VPC peer to the ODB network, where my EC2 instances are up and running. And then the inbounds and outbound rules. For the outbound rule, I keep the default. And for inbound rule, is important to allow the client subnet defined within the ODB network to reach the port 53, the DNS port, both for the TCP and UDP protocol. So let's add these two rules, inbound rules, starting from the TCP, port 53, and the inbound CIDR block, the CIDR block associated to the ODB network client subnet. And I do the same for the UDP protocol. I can add one or more optional tag and create security group. Now that the security group is created, I connect to the Route 53 dashboard. I can configure an inbound endpoint. Create inbound endpoint. I specify a name. I select default as endpoint category. I select the VPC that will be used to configure the inbound endpoint addresses. In this case, the same VPC peer to the ODB network. The security group that I have just created that allow the inbound traffic from the ODB network client subnet on port 53, the endpoint type IP version 4, and the default protocol DO53. And then I need to specify at least two subnets where the listening IP addresses for the inbound endpoint will be configured. It's recommended to select two different subnets in two different availability zones. In this case, I'm selecting one availability zone that is the same of the ODB network and a different one. You can add one or more optional tags. I added the created by tags again. And finally, create inbound endpoint. This process takes a few minutes. So I stop the video. Okay, now the endpoint is ready. I can copy one of the two addresses attached to this endpoint that will be used to configure the forwarder rule on OCI side. Let's switch to the OCI console and select the virtual cloud network associated to our ODB network. I move to the security tab. I select create new security group and I provide a security group name for this new network security group that will be used by the endpoint forwarder. And it's important to specify two egress rules. Two egress rules that allow to reach the AWS Route 53 inbound endpoint on port 53 from this VCN. As you can see, I specify a rule with this destination CIDR range that is the entire CIDR range of the VPC where the inbound endpoint is configured. You could also consider to configure the rule just for the IP addresses associated to the inbound endpoint or Route 53. I have to add two rules. one for the TCP protocol and the second one for the UDP protocol. And now I can create the network security group. When the network security group is ready, I can switch back to the virtual cloud network, select my VCN, the DNS resolver, select the rules tab, and configure a forwarder rule. So manage rules, add a new rule, rule condition domains. I specify which domain name I want to resolve from this VCN, ec2.internal. It's the domain name of the private hosted zone on the Amazon VPC. Rule action forward, source endpoint forwarder, and destination IP address, one of the two IP addresses associated with the Route 53 inbound endpoint. You could also consider to configure a network load balancer on OCI to balance both the IP addresses configured on the Route 53 inbound endpoint. I specify again the domain name that has not been added before, and I add this new rule. Now that the rule has been added to the private resolver, I need also to associate the network security group to the forwarder endpoint to allow the network traffic to the Route 53 inbound endpoint. I have already configured the network security group. I select that from the list, and I attach the network security group to the forwarder endpoint. And the configuration is now complete. So I can test now the DNS resolution from the two virtual machines on the Oracle Database AWS VM cluster. And as you can see, now the fully qualified name of the EC2 instances running within the ODB peer VPC are resolved from both the VMs in the ExaDB VM cluster. We are at the end of this video. I hope it has been useful, and here a summary of what we have covered. The creation of a Route 53 inbound endpoint along with associated security group, the configuration of the OCI resolver forwarder endpoint, including the associated resolver rule and a dedicated network security group, and finally the validation of DNS resolution from the virtual machine within an Oracle database at AWS Exadata VM cluster for the EC2 instances fully qualified DNS names. And I say you goodbye to the next episode, sharing this link to the public documentation and blogs related to DNS setup configuration for Oracle database at AWS. Thank you and see you soon.